and welcome back to The Marketing Hustle. If it's your first time here, I'm your host, Lottie Unwin. On this pod, I talk startup and scale-up marketing and try and get into the really juicy and actionable stuff with my guests. We've got over 60 episodes in the archives for you to tuck into, but in this series, we're talking not just to founders, but to CMOs and marketing directors, so we can hear what actually happens day to day inside the businesses that we all kind of wish we worked for. Charlotte Gunn is head of brand at Gail's Bakery, tasked with codifying the Gail's brand so that everyone in the business understands it, and tasked to build out an in-house creative team, so taking like the agency model and putting it inside the company. She came round 3 months into her mat leave with her mum and daughter Xanthi in a coffee shop round the corner. I was incredibly impressed both by her work, her energy and her fresh face. Charlotte is going to teach you why brand is so much more than brand guidelines. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about what I do. I run 3 businesses. Upworld, which is for you if you're interested in learning about startup marketing, building your network and getting a sense of community. UpTalent if you're looking for a new role or if you're hiring, and Brand Hackers if you need fractional marketing support, so a bit of expertise or a completely different way of thinking about resourcing marketing. I can't wait to hear what you think of this episode.
So, your job was invented for you.
Wow, that feels like a massive overclaim that I need to temper.
No, let's own it.
Exist before I came in, was not developed for me personally. But
Okay.
yes, it was a new role.
And why did Gail's decide it was time for a head of brand?
So I think I would say that there is a guy at Gail's who would hate that I'm even talking about him because he loves to exist behind the scenes. He's my boss. He's wonderful. I adore him. He has been at Gail's since the origins, sort of 20 years. He was an OG baker and he now looks after everything product and brands. He's our creative director, essentially. And he essentially is a one-man band who embodies the brand. He is Gail's sort of bottled, but he cannot, in isolation, help everybody else understand what it means to be on brand. So what we needed was a translator, really, for everything that he sort of believed and wanted to say about the brand. How did we better get that both internally into more teams with a greater understanding of what that meant to deliver sort of their individual action plans on brand? And then also how we could communicate that better sort of externally to our customers and audience as well. And so essentially sort of more processes in place, that understanding, that inspiration, working with other teams and that translation really.
Yeah.
So it's sort of taking him, getting it out there.
So what is your mission in your job?
My job personally, Gail's, I think to have more people have a greater understanding of what it means to be sort of on brand. And I always think this with sort of there are companies that are really great, like, the Apples of the world, where you just fundamentally know what they will and won't do. That is sort of the Apple way, what is acceptable. And I think for us, it was a much grayer area. People sort of saying, I don't really know if that feels right or not right. And then a lot of work not really getting out the door because it would get to the end and it would...
In the business
would be to be sort of not quite right. So how do we empower everybody to create work that they feel is right for and we are confident that can sort of go out the door and be additive to the work that we sort of want to be doing?
I think that's fascinating because that's such a common problem of businesses who get stuck on alignment and it's perceived as bureaucracy. It's perceived as we just can't get stuff done. And actually so rarely do marketing teams have the humility to say, this is getting stuck because we haven't empowered the team right. I hear so often, they just don't get it. They don't understand. It's maybe they don't understand because you've not told them.
Exactly. Yeah, you've not given them the tools.
Maybe it's not their fault to not be telepathic as to what's in your head.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the brief that you were recruited.
So that was part of the brief. The other big part of my role was to set up the creative studio. So we have sort of this internal, it's not, agency is the wrong word because that almost makes it sound like sort of we're in service to other parts of the business. It's very much a sort of working hand in hand with other teams. But essentially it's sort of strategic and creative leadership in-house in the form of sort of myself as more of the brand strategy side. We have a head of creative. We obviously have designers, brand managers, producers, etc. But we will create work. So we will both own the brand plan, which is our sort of, 80% of what we do is all of the activity that goes out in support of sort of, I suppose, like communicating the brand, making sure that we do work that resonates with our audience, etc. And then another part is making work for other teams that feels on brand. So that might be, I don't know, a toolkit for all of the bakery managers at Christmas to go out and do lovely things within the community. So for example, this year we made an advent calendar. So every day you opened it and it was something like, you know, it might be something for your customer, give a free coffee today and ask them how their day is. It might be go to a local business and establish a relationship, and that then gets distributed out to our 170 bakeries. So yeah, it's sort of dual fold. But essentially when I came in, there was our creative director and a sort of freelance creative lead. And then my role was to sort of define how the studio would be set up, what our remit would be, ways of working with other teams, and then essentially sort of hire and fill those roles.
Is that very different? Like, what else goes on around that? And so the context of my question is, I think often a head of brand and a head of marketing have kind of interchangeable job titles.
Yeah.
And I feel like I do quite a lot of fielding founders who say, like, this is what I need doing. And I'm kind of like, oh, I don't, it's always like, oh, I don't know what these marketing titles are anymore. Whatever. Yeah. And sometimes I think they're right. I'm like, you could call this job anything. Like, let's just think about what candidates are going to apply and it doesn't really matter. You don't feel like you have that kind of job. You have a real head of brand job.
Yes, I suppose. So I'm not a classic marketer in how I would define being, you know, very, very hot on insights, customer insights, category insights, being really, really good on channel expertise. So media planning, media buying, reporting, all of that side of stuff is not part of my remit. Mine is very much sort of like brand strategy, so annual planning from a brand perspective, and creative really. So like building campaigns, but not just sort of big above the line campaigns. Actually at Gail's our budgets are much, much smaller than I think probably loads of people would expect, especially our media budgets. So it's about sort of creating entertainment, not advertising. So we would never just create sort of a 60-second film that would go out on iPlayer. We want to create work that has value in the world by either being sort of entertaining or educational or inspirational, whatever that might be. So I think probably my background is agencies. So I spent the first sort of decade of my career in ad agencies, design agencies, branding agencies. So it's more of running that creative engine than it is more of the sort of, I suppose, like the classic nuts and bolts of marketing. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
Gail's is also the only business I've ever worked in. So whether that's really odd, I can't tell you because it's my first in-house role.
I think the creative studio approach and like in-housing agency models is growing, but is something that I've only, and I'd be so interested if anyone listening to this has other references. I've heard of it a lot in like big business capacity. So like Adidas, Lego.
Specsavers is a big one.
Okay, interesting. Is it common in, I don't want to call Gail's a startup, it's absolutely a scale up, but it's not a Specsavers.
Yeah. I think probably less common than the other model, which would be sort of marketers and then maybe working with external agencies. I think it's really interesting, and not to sort of take a step back and get too macro, but I think the world of agencies is also changing with clients' budgets sort of reducing massively. And there's just not the money to give to an external team to spend 6 months getting immersed into your business to then, you know, help you develop what they believe that sort of your next 5-year direction should be. And I think it's right that creative and strategic leadership is retained in-house. I think probably what I don't necessarily believe in, but would make sense probably for the Adidases when they have, you know, massive teams and massive budgets, is that everything belongs in-house. I still think that there is a world for working with experts. So we work with packaging agencies, with digital agencies, we've got PR agencies. So we don't necessarily have all of that expertise in-house, but certainly from a sort of visionary leadership perspective, that is retained in-house. And then it's more about bringing in smaller experts to help in certain areas of our business, as opposed to just giving this huge problem to an above the line agency going, you know, we need more customers, go.
That's so interesting. So I'm supporting a business at the moment that I shouldn't name that is kind of on the path to building this structure.
Okay.
And so I was starting to think about it. And I found that really exciting because I was like, oh, we're asking these questions. This is great. What would you say would need to be true in a business for in-housing creative function at that kind of scale to be the right approach?
So I think you need to have appreciation for creative at a leadership level. So it does not work if you just become a sort of churn machine who's just creating sort of 50 performance ads.
Yeah, it's not an art working solution.
No, and then you'll never retain great talent. Like if you want really good creative people, you need to give them autonomy and responsibility and ownership of the work that comes out. So I think you need a leadership team who understand the power of brand and brand done well. And actually that is more than just performance marketing and willing to sort of invest in what that takes. So sort of a leadership team. You need a brand, I suppose, a brand that's interesting and a good brand strategy that will attract the right sort of people is another big one. And then I suppose sort of the right culture for it to work. So like time, I mean, we're fairly quick and fairly nimble, but ultimately sort of you can't just be pivoting all the time. You need to give that team time to activate, whether that's like an annual plan. You can't, and I think there's always this thing about sort of like, you know, if we grow a business over 5 years, why are we constantly checking in quarterly, looking at sort of how the numbers did last quarter? Well, of course, we can't sort of make changes as quickly as we would like to, or judge them so quickly, I should say. So I suppose sort of investment in, it might take a bit of time for that studio to get up and running and creating work that's really sort of moving the needle. But that
it's a very long-term plan.
Or a longer-term plan than, definitely. And more investment, I suppose, in headcount, which is always a bit scary for senior people. So you can give money to an agency and you think, okay, I've given you a 6-month retainer, it hasn't really worked. Okay, fine, we'll move on. We won't do that next year. You can't do that if you're hiring a team. You can't give it a go for 6 months and then go, okay, it didn't really work. We'll just fire you all. It needs to have a little bit more investment and belief.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. Because it's such an arbitrary distinction. Like actually, no agency can deliver great work in 6 months. No internal team can deliver great work in 6 months.
No.
It's just where it sits on the P&L. You either say it's in my marketing budget because it's an agency cost, or it's in my people budget because it's a headcount cost. And one of them feels so transactional and easy and relaxed, and the other is this like hugely emotional, very complicated thing.
So true.
When actually, if you did like not the pros and cons, if you were like, what's the cost? What's my ability to change my mind? How permanent is this decision? They're quite similar.
Yeah.
Both of them have a 30-day notice period. Both of them are quite easygoing. Employment law is actually quite liberal for 2 years. All of these things are true, but the weight we put in, I respect it because it's a different dynamic with human emotion, but this weight around hiring humans versus like basically treating agencies like they're completely disposable.
I know. And I mean, I have huge respect for agencies. As I say, that was the world that I existed in for 10 years. And I think so often they are not set up for success. They don't have the right briefs. They don't have the right budgets. And I remember this from sort of doing new biz at a branding agency, and no client is ever willing to give their budget because they think, oh, if we tell you what we're willing to pay, you'll spend it all. And it's like, we will, hun, because it's never enough. Trust me, when you give us 10 grand to rebrand you, it's not going to cost enough. But,
what that doesn't mean is we're like throwing out the 3K legit proposal.
No, exactly, and like totting it up. Yeah, precisely. So I think it is. You're so right that it's really sort of unfair that agencies are treated in this really disposable way. But it's true, and there are so many amazing, talented people at agencies, particularly strategists, who are just desperate to help and to sort of help inform the business, and they just can't almost get their teeth into it because you're either sort of not set up because we're still scoping based on time, and you've got something like, I mean, I've seen strat directors resourced at 3% across a business, and you're like, okay, how much are you actually going to ever be able to help with that? But also it's just like, you've got 5 weeks to deliver a new strategy. That's great. I worked at Gail's for 7 months before, in-house, attending all these meetings, doing stakeholder interviews before I properly felt like I actually had my feet under the table and I understood the business. So how we are asking external people to come in, sit in a few meetings and have a sense of what we need is nuts. And then they present something back and we go, we hate it, you're rubbish. It's like, no, that was never going to work. So I think it's so tough for agencies out there at the moment to be able to really deliver fruitful change when they are not set up in any way to succeed.
But there are moments, I'm saying this as though we agree, maybe we don't. There are moments where having someone external, almost because of the naivety in their position, can be invaluable.
Totally.
When have you seen that work really well, and when do you use it at Gales?
So I think when you have like a really clear expertise, and I think this is the thing that I always sort of struggled a bit with this in agencies. So I was in account management or client services, and I used to get told, I remember when I sort of came in my early 20s by my line managers at the time, you know, you need to know your client's business better than they do themselves. And it was like, okay, so I could have got like a Google alert on for, I don't know, Nike, say, and I'm messaging my client being like, oh, did you see that, you know, Adidas had brought out this new shoe? And they're like, yes, we did. We've known about it for 3 years. Like, just because it's just reached Google, it's not news to us. Whereas actually the way that I see a sort of positive working relationship with agencies is, I know my business, Gail's, you know, insert great packaging, great digital, great communications, great design. How can we bring those two sides of the same coin together? I'm not going to expect you to know the ins and outs of the challenges we face as a food business. I can help. I also don't know, you know, the best compostable packaging, how to make something that gets to the grocery shelf without looking sort of battered and beaten up. So you help me with that stuff. I can use your expertise. I can share what we know. And then I find agency relationships can be absolutely brilliant, but it's that respect for one another's skill set and sort of not expecting them to know everything about your business, and likewise not assuming that you know everything about what it is that they do, but sort of having that clear brief.
What's implicit in what you're saying is an appreciation for the time it's going to take to make this work.
An appreciation for the skill set that they bring and how that is, you know, different to ours, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, if only everyone was as nice as you. In your work so far, what is the impact you're most proud of, or a piece of work that you think, that was me really doing what I was brought in to do?
I think the companion really was sort of a piece of work that I was incredibly proud of. And it took about 2 years in the making, because I feel like I should sort of...
Yeah, I think we need to do a little demo. Here we are, the companion, beautiful magazine.
Beautiful magazine. And essentially it's sort of what was really important about the companion, and is important to us about all of the work that we make in the studio, is that it sort of holds its own out in the world. It's not a puff piece. It's not about, you know, subliminally in these pages are lots of ads for all of our various products.
Buy a croissant. Have you bought a croissant yet?
How many croissant references?
None in this one, or very few. This is actually bread focused. But it's essentially about sort of communicating the things that we are interested in, but actually through the lens of other people who are doing it really well. So, for example, there's a interview with Vanessa Kimball, who's sort of Britain's self-declared queen of sourdough. She has the sourdough school. It's incredible. She does so much work to sort of promote how good it is for your gut, etc., etc. There's sort of a interview or long read on Clink, which is a bakery in HMP, the Brixton prison.
Yes, I've read about that.
And the work that they do with sort of rehabilitation of convicts. There are some recipes, there's short stories, there's an article called The Terroir of Wheat, which is about sort of how, you know, the place that it is grown can impact the taste and the quality of the wheat in the same way that you would assume sort of with wine and vines. So it's very much sort of like really lovely long reads, beautifully designed, not about just selling products. And I think that is sort of the first thing that we've done in that ilk that we're super, super proud of, and sort of will hopefully pave the way for much more to come.
It's very inspiring. And I think a lot of brand teams will kind of watch you present this like physical thing you've made and think, screw you. Like, I don't get to do that.
How the hell did you get the business to agree to that being a good use of time? Were you challenged to measure it?
So I think the business, for us, sort of awareness is not a problem that we struggle with. Although I think, interestingly, our landscape is changing all the time.
Tell me a little bit more about that quickly.
So we historically have always been sort of in the south, obviously starting in London and then sort of expanding. We now have a couple in bakeries in Bristol, more recently Bath, and then sort of further south around like Lewis, etc.
Yeah.
And we're gradually expanding slightly further north. So we're now in, Solihull and places in Birmingham, Leamington Spa, those sorts of places. Around the south area, for want of a better word, our awareness has always been really high and actually punches above its weight given the size of our estate. So whilst we are growing, we are drastically smaller in terms of number of bakeries versus some of your other big players that you might consider our competitive set, like your Costas or your Pretz, whoever that might be.
And so you have, in practical terms, you have much higher brand awareness per bakery.
Yes, precisely.
Than an alternative. And is that across a nationally representative audience?
Predominantly in the south.
Okay.
So we're much less in the north. And I think what is interesting is as we expand further, we will definitely need to work harder on our brand awareness because ultimately, it's far, we're far more likely to see success of a bakery opening in a new area if there is awareness and understanding of who Gail's is and we're not sort of starting from scratch. And likewise, if you meet us for the first time on the grocery shelf, so for example, we have a huge partnership with Waitrose, you can buy sourdough bread and potentially sort of more products to come. If you're walking into a busy aisle, why are you choosing Gail's if you've sort of never heard of them? That will be an increasing challenge that we need to overcome. But broadly, awareness is not our biggest problem. Our biggest problem is sort of consideration. So people having a positive feeling towards Gail's. And we are quite sort of, we can be quite a Marmite brand in the sense that people love us. We have amazing sort of advocacy and people who really, really love the brand. And then we have a lot of people who, well, not a lot, but we have people who seem to think that we sort of represent something into which they do not buy. So more recently, we've had sort of, I don't know if you read about how the Lib Dems use sort of the Gail's approach to their constituencies. So basically anywhere that had a Gail's was targeted by the Lib Dems as as an area to try and sort of get people to obviously vote for them. But we have sort of slightly become this face of almost gentrification.
Yeah.
That there are certain areas where people believe that we're somehow sort of leeching away from the high street, which is something that essentially, back to sort of your original question about sort of, why the head of brand role, I think is something that took us a while to understand that we needed more of a voice. I think Gail's is 20 years old this year. For so many years, we focused on the operations of our business. So how do we open great bakeries that have consistent, amazing quality, that are beautiful? We work with a whole suite of architects who individually design every single bakery. So it is bespoke to the area, pays homage to, the local architecture, or it might be inspired by, for example, like the Bloomsbury Group. And we just thought that was enough to just have our heads down and be doing business really, really well. And then what happened was this sort of vacuum opened up where people started telling our story for us because we weren't really putting enough positive information about what we were doing out there in the world. We were keeping it sort of hushed up behind closed doors. And actually now what we're trying to do through things like the Companion, and obviously this isn't sort of stories about us, but what we're essentially trying to do is lift the lid on all of the amazing things that Gail's are doing, and sort of getting that word out there so that, we can try and shift public opinion of those people who seem to think that we are, the worst parts of a chain, putting sort of profits over purpose, reducing product quality as we grow, taking something away from the community, which is so far from the truth of our business. But it's sort of on us because we haven't really told anyone anything different for such a long time. So that's something that we really acknowledge that we need to be better at. So to your question on sort of how to get it through the business, I think there is an understanding that is a really, really big task that we need to focus on, is communicating those messages in great ways. And then I will also say that, as a leadership team, there is so much respect for the power of brand. And I think Gail's has always had such a strong brand from the start. They appreciate, that needs to be invested in. So it was never a huge, I should say, very lucky. It was never a huge thing to sort of overcome. I think there's real belief from the top as to sort of why that's so important.
So you have a very clear commercial job to be done around creating awareness and brand engagement around positive stories that are controlled by Gail's.
Yep.
And I guess in that context, then saying, hey, I want to make a magazine, which I genuinely think is most brand teams' dream. I think
Yeah,
that's
I'm sure it is. We presented it when I worked at agencies and they were like, no, obviously not.
So I've been I think this is a massive waste of I've been the one that said, I think that's a beautiful idea, and I would love to be in a world where we can do that. But
hell no.
Under what sun do you think we have resource bandwidth for this to be the strategic priority?
Yeah.
But what's so interesting about the way you frame that is that this was the most pressing strategic priority, and so it's delightfully the right strategic response.
And I'm obviously, I will say that there are many other briefs that go on under Gail's that do have slightly more sort of commercial focused intentions. Like we still do sort of performance marketing, etc. But I think it was sort of like, that's all happening, that's fine, but there's this big gulf that's missing. So we need to do more things to sort of holistically balance out that communication.
When it comes to awareness, how, let's take an example. You've got a store opening in a town where you don't think there's massive brand awareness. Is that a challenge you're at the moment? Or is first of all, is that how it works currently? Or is it like we know that our kind of person is there, so we're following them?
So we do a lot of work, obviously, to sort of understand where the areas are that we should be focusing on. And yes, 100%, we go in with a fairly good idea that there's going to be some interest in what we offer as a business. In terms of sort of drumming up awareness in those new areas, there's a lot of work to be done, and that is predominantly done by our incredible neighbourhood marketing team, who do loads of outreach within local communities. So it might be talking to like-minded businesses. They get school trips of children coming in to learn about bread on opening day. They do partnerships with run clubs, mum groups, book groups. It's all about sort of finding ways to offer up Gail's as a space to sort of be in service to that community. And then sort of depending on how new the area is. So for example, if it's a brand new city that we've never been in before, we will also do, local PR. We might work with local influencers to come in and sort of test the products. So that's a very focused, nuanced approach, which is quite different to, say opening on a new bakery on like the Strand in London, where it's just about a lot of people do know Gail's and we don't need to sort of work as hard to, it's just sort of showing up. Yeah, exactly.
You have a neighbourhood marketing team.
Yes, it's a huge, huge part of our business.
That's amazing. How big is the team?
Small. They punch hugely above their weight. There's 3 of them at the moment, and they work really, really closely with operations, bakery managers. They organise amazing events. We've had sort of 2 So Far Sounds. I think more since I've left. I've obviously not been in the business for the last couple of months with baby, but they are constantly sort of drumming out this churn of amazing events, content, partnerships all the time. And actually, it's this is the sort of thing where I say it's on us to be better at communicating more widely, because those obviously have huge resonance within those communities. But we also need to tell people that we're doing that, even if it's not relevant to you and your community, because I think there's this whole thing where people think sort of, big chains coming in, it's taking away from the high street. And actually our belief is that, a rising tide lifts all ships. Like predominantly we will take over empty spaces. We take over a lot of banks. I think the Solihull one was sort of an empty Laura Ashley. And we're not coming in and sort of running ripshod over smaller businesses. We actually want to bring more people back to the high street, which we think then benefits sort of everyone. And we know, it's a very boring old story about sort of how the high street is dropping away, and we all know that. But actually, we want to play a part in a thriving, bustling high street. We don't want to be sort of the only offering that has sort of ruined everybody else. We want to play our part. So I think all of the work that the neighbourhood marketing team do to cement our role in the community is so, so incredible. And we need to sort of shine a bigger spotlight on it as part of our comms so that people sort of understand that it's something that we do. Yeah. Because it is quite unique.
It's a really powerful distinction between one world of looking at messaging where you say if it's not relevant to you. You can't go to that event. You
Totally.
can't see that thing. It's not relevant to our wider brand story. To a different world of messaging that says, if you know that we're the kind of brand that does stuff like this,
Yeah.
you feel a bit differently about us, and there's something softer, and as you say, like, you understand that brand is rooted in community, even if it's not something you can appreciate directly.
Yeah, totally. And that's actually a conversation that we have a lot internally, is sort of what is the right way to communicate that, because it may not be right for somebody to receive an email about an event happening 300 miles away from them.
Yes, I can see that's frustrating.
That's annoying, and you're thinking, like, this isn't for me. Why have I been put on this email thread?
Yeah, it triggers those, please improve your segmentation.
/ unsubscribe. But
that's the difference between B2B and B2C. I get that. I'd like to give you some feedback on your segmentation.
Oh God, well, good.
You just get an unsubscribe.
Exactly. But versus sort of, I don't know, a really lovely reel that captures carol singing out of young school children outside one of our bakeries, that someone doesn't need to go, I sincerely dislike this because it features Dulwich and I'm in, at Birmingham. Actually, it's just like, that's really nice. That's happening there. Maybe it's happening in the one near me. I don't know. I might check it out. I might not. But I actually just feel a little bit better about this brand. And I think that's for me, that is the core of what a great brand is. And we sit in these meeting rooms and we look at our brand strategy and we think that is something tangible, and it's not. A brand ultimately only exists in your customers' minds, and we can just try and do 100 things, 100 tiny things to just gently nudge people's associations or beliefs in one direction. But I mean, for Gail's, you open the door, it's the smell, it's the level of the quantity of food on the baker's table, it's the art on the walls, it's the design of the bakery, it's how you're greeted. Can someone, standing behind the till, tell you the tasting notes of the spring filter? Can they tell you what's been made that's seasonal? All of that stuff is far more important of our brand than, protecting our logo. Obviously, it's sacrilegious. We obviously protect our logo. But that's the stuff that's so powerful, but it's also so, so hard to police and control and educate. So it's both a massive, massive challenge and a huge opportunity when your brand exists predominantly through people. That's our biggest channel.
So I love that and the clarity with which you say that, and it's so self-evidently true. Like, your experience of going to a Gail's is so not what's in the typical roles and responsibilities of a brand team. It's so much more extensive than what would sit in like a brand guidelines PDF. Yeah. And yet you're dealing with like fresh food, humans, local people, like so many things that are out of your control.
Yeah.
What can you as a brand leader actually do? Like, can we get really tangible about how you work to make sure that you're attempting to influence this stuff?
Sure. So, I mean, there's a myriad of things. We do so much training internally. So learning and development is a massive, massive part of the team at Gail's. And that will be things like, how you actually make the food that comes through. So we're a seasonal business, so we have 5 seasons, which is slightly confusing, but we separate Christmas and winter. So winter starts in January, so you have sort of Christmas and winter, and then obviously spring,
that makes total sense.
So we have a new menu that comes out every season. So it won't be you obviously will always have sort of your croissants and things, but there will be seasonal refreshes that use sort of particularly seasonal ingredients. So that menu has to be cascaded to, teams across 170 bakeries every single time. So learning and development is a massive, massive part of Gail's. And I think from a brand team perspective, it's all about sort of the whys behind those changes. And it's inspiring that food knowledge and that food love in every single team member. And it's tricky because you get a lot of different people. There are bakery managers who've been with us for, a decade, who love Gail's, who love what we do. And then there's maybe a team member who's just planning on, working for a couple of months over the summer, and then they're off to uni, and they're probably not as interested in sort of the whys behind our menu changes. But it's about inspiring all of those teams equally. So it's, properly sort of training them, making sure everyone's tasting the menus. It sounds really obvious, but you can't have someone sort of 3 weeks after launch, someone going, oh, is this good? Don't know, never eaten it.
We all know that experience in a restaurant when you say to someone, is this good? And you watch someone go,
yes.
Or like, I've never tried it. And how that breaks
the trust,
feeling of confidence.
Yeah, totally. So there's a lot of education that comes sort of behind the scenes. I mentioned at the beginning that sort of we'll do lots of toolkits for bakeries as well. So, there's cards about sort of tasting notes, ingredients, etc., etc. There's also, for every piece of communication that we put externally to our audience, we also trickle that down internally. So for example, with the companion, there was a huge amount of work that was done to communicate that internally, why we're doing it, what's it for, you know, how to talk about it to customers. So for everything that goes out to our audience, it also gets cascaded internally to our teams. I mean, we do a lot of work. We look after all of the point of sale in every single business. So my team will do all of the menu updates, like all of the signage, that all comes through us. So that's sort of centralized, all of that copy that's written. We do all of our packaging internally. So while we may work with experts, all of that copy again will all come through us. So it's trying to keep a tight handle on everything that we can do. And then the bits that are slightly more open, leaving that sort of up to the teams, but giving them the tools. So we have a sort of a process that we call sort of brilliant basics and magic moments, which is like helping the ops managers sort of run through this with their bakery. So it's like, if you think about a travel path that a customer has when they come into your bakery, think about sort of the highs and lows within there. So it might be, you know, I walk into a bakery, there's a massive queue. Okay, my interest is immediately sort of like, oh, this is a bit annoying. So it's helping the ops team map out, where are those pain points? How do we just increase those pain points to a brilliant basic? So it might be something like, if you're in a queue, how do we do better sampling? So giving people free stuff basically while they're waiting, trying a new loaf, trying a new iced tea, whatever it might be, to just increase their experience from rubbish to decent. And then what are the opportunities where you can really give someone quite like a special experience, and that's sort of, you know, your magic moment. And it's trying to imbue that within the ops team to then pass that to the bakery managers. So that's sort of like, you know, that service level that's more than just customer service. We hate sort of the word service or hospitality, because it's sort of like, you know, you want it to be more of an experience than just a service, but how you help them sort of understand that the bakery is their sort of like, you know, mini business that they need to run brilliantly, and how can they make sure that all the customers are having the best possible experience. So training the teams on that sort of thing as well is a really, really big part of sort of what I do, or my team does more broadly.
That's so interesting. Is there an example of a magic moment?
Oh my God, I mean, there's so many. So there's really lovely things that sort of get sent round. There was a one that came in sort of before I left, which was a lady who had been sort of coming to Gail's for a very, very long time. She really sadly had dementia, and her daughter took away her credit cards because she was sort of buying things and then sort of forgetting that she'd bought them, and obviously it wasn't sort of the best for her bank balance. So her daughter had said, you know, have cash so that you can obviously go and buy the things that you like, but maybe let's not sort of give you access to your credit cards. We are cashless, so we brought it in with COVID. It's so much sort of quicker, safer for our staff, all the rest of it. But this lady was sort of continuing to come to Gail's, and the team were just continuing to give her her regular order for weeks, until I think her daughter sort of said, hang on a minute, mum, like, how are you paying for this? And went down to Gail's and tried to say, can I sort of pay for all of this? And they said, no, you know, she's a regular customer. We love her, like that. And that's such a incredibly special moment. There was another one with a little girl who has autism. For her routine is really, really important. She comes in with her mum. She always has the same cookie on a Saturday. And the team now know that if that cookie is selling out, to put that aside for her so that it's always there when she comes in. And it's just things like that that just, you know your audience, you know your regulars. It's so powerful. And for those people who get to experience that, you know, that will make them feel more things towards your brand than any amount of marketing could possibly ever do.
So that's like the good old days of Pret, right? When you used to get a free coffee if you were charming enough. And I never got one.
I mean, honestly, the best way to have your staff be treated amazingly, because you would walk into Pret, you'd be so friendly, you'd be so charming, in the hope that you would get this free coffee. So they probably...
And my partner would get one like 5 times a week.
Oh, he's clearly a lot nicer than you.
He's so nice, and it would drive me mad.
But I mean, what an easy way to just... I mean, who knows? I don't think I ever... Well, actually, you obviously know someone who benefited. For me, it was like the sort of TV license people who supposedly come round to your house. Like, is anyone
It's an urban myth.
Is anyone getting these free coffees?
I can tell you it was a thing. It just didn't happen to
the best.
To the average Joes like us. It only happened to like Earth's Fallen Angels. But it's gone.
Yeah.
Because of like tightening of purse strings. How do you protect, like, how's that structured? Do branches have budgets? How do you protect that level of local bakery autonomy so that they can do the right thing by your brand?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, a lot of it is common sense. So, the bakery manager is responsible for sort of the individual profitability of their bakery. It's not a franchise model, but that is on them. That's part of, their role. So obviously you can't be sort of giving everything away for free. That would come back to you as an individual. But within reason, we do trust our bakery managers to make those decisions. We're not coming down on every single croissant going, why are we £3.50 down or whatever this day. We do have that level of trust because we have to. And we have amazing bakery managers who've got great relationships with regulars, with the community, and they've built that up because, there's that level of trust that goes down to them. So I think it's just about, not taking the piss, really.
Yeah. Do you think that's going to get harder as Gail's, your expansion plans are aggressive?
They are.
What are you anticipating as coming up the tracks as challenges for you and your team from that?
So I think the brand image, I think for a long time, back to this whole thing about sort of not putting out enough positive stories, the bakery openings is the one thing that's consistently been PR'd. And obviously what that's then feels like to an individual consumer is and another one and another one. And I think we were doing things like putting every single opening on our Instagram, and it was like, actually people don't need to know. And back to that thing about sort of how relevant is it to you, that was always the push and pull, was actually, okay, hang on, if we're opening in a new area, it would be great for more people to know that that's there. But for the people who follow, who are just seeing this like constant ream of opening, that's putting out a message that in the absence of anything else positive, just feels like we're this, big corporate machine that's opening lots, which is sort of not fair to our business. So I think it's that growing with sort of equity, or growing with, value behind the business is a big challenge. I think sort of, I suppose, like, as I mentioned, sort of the grocery shelf is going to be a really, really interesting one for us. And then I think sort of just maintaining, the big thing for us is always, as we grow, how do we maintain quality? How do we hire the right people who sort of protect that? How do we train them quick enough? Just the normal sort of like operational challenges, I suppose, of any business.
How do you measure brand impact?
So in sort of your classic ways, we have a sort of brand tracking program that tells us how our awareness is doing, considerations, sort of like associations, word of mouth, all of that sort of thing. So we do have that. I think it's really hard not to sort of exist in a bubble where you're seeing maybe a negative headline and suddenly you think that everyone hates you, and actually then you speak to people and like you this morning, you're like, what? No, I hadn't heard that. Oh God, I thought everyone knew. But sort of our normal brand tracking metrics, I suppose.
Okay. I can't help but move the conversation onto babies. I can't have you here and not get 10 minutes of how are you doing?
Absolutely do.
So you're 3 months into mat leave.
Yes.
And you're loving it, but your brain's still thinking about the day job. Clearly. I mean, look how coherent you are.
I love it. Obviously, my firstborn, so Xanthi, she is fab. We're super lucky. She's a great sleeper, great eater, chonky wee thing. But yeah, I do. It's so tricky before you have a baby. You sort of don't know how you're going to be. I thought maybe I'd sort of be just like closing the laptop and going, see you in 12 months. And I miss it. I do. Yeah. I want to be thinking about these things. I want to be having these conversations. I think especially sort of, I love the world of food and drink. When I left agencies and I wanted to go in-house, I knew I wanted it to be something in the world of sort of food more broadly. And so you never switch off. I'm reading Vittles or Slop or whatever it might be. And I'm thinking, oh, this is relevant. I should send it. But then you're also like, I do not want to be that person that's sort of 6 months out of date and is like, hey guys, like, have you seen this thing? And everyone's like, oh my God, just go away.
Actually really busy.
Just come back in 12 months when you have time to be here and be present. So I think you're just like constantly like this sort of sad sack circling in the periphery, being like, I'll just share this little thing, but it's cool if you don't want to read it. Like, just come back to me when you're interested. But my team are great. I'm actually seeing them I saw them last week, seeing them in a couple of weeks for lunch. Great. So it's nice to just sort of check in. I mean, they're doing amazingly without me. I'm barely needed, but no, it's good.
And how did you find planning for the time off?
I left at quite a fortuitous time. So we sort of do our annual brand planning from, sort of August, September through the end of the year. Our financial year starts in March. I never really understand why, because it doesn't seem to align with anyone else or anything or anyone. But it starts in March. So, and I left on sort of early February. So I was able to basically set up the annual brand plan, 12 months of activity and sort of briefs for all of that individual activity, and then leave that with the team to activate in my absence, which they're doing an incredible job at. So it's good for now. Obviously, for planning for next year is a different thing, but I'll hopefully either be able to do a little bit from mat leave or leave it to the team who are more than capable of probably doing it without me anyway.
Do you have any advice to your old self, as someone who is literally in the position you're in? Any advice for me, for a friend? So I'm 5 weeks away from mat leave. Mm-hmm. What would you have said to yourself then?
Start early, because you never know what's going to happen. I was fairly well planned. I had to have a elective C-section because my daughter was breech. So I sort of knew when I was going to be out, but I had plenty of friends who were sort of ended up having to go way earlier because their baby came sort of 3-4 weeks earlier. So they sort of had all these visions for these beautiful handover documents that they never got to write because they just had to sort of close their laptop and exactly run into the Uber and get the hell down to the hospital. So start early. I basically treated it as that I was going to do my handover 3 weeks before I left, and then I was going to be there for 3 weeks for inevitably when the wheels fell off and I realised that I'd forgotten to tell someone something massive, it would come out in the works sort of whilst I was still there and could help and support. So I'd say start early. Make sure that the support is in place for your team. So like that line management's really clear. I also did sort of all of the objectives with my team before I left. So we at Gail's, we have sort of twice a year, you have your what's that I'm looking for, like your review process, and it normally happens in March and October. I was obviously going to miss that, so I did that early with all of my team because I didn't want them to feel that they were doing it with someone new or who hadn't seen all of the work that they'd done over the past 6 months. So sort of left everyone with a really clear objectives and action plan for whilst I was away, and made sure that that was all done with the person who was going to be looking after them. So that's probably a big part. And then, essentially just work as hard as you can until you can't anymore. Well, what I did.
But that's the danger, right? I think that's like, I really feel like there's a world where that becomes my strategy and I just keep going full pelt until the moment where I like decide that I'm going to stop, but probably the moment where I have to call a cab.
Yeah.
I don't think that's right.
Try and give yourself a false deadline.
Yeah, I think the false deadline is really important.
Definitely.
And holding true to that false deadline.
Yes.
Did you find that when that false deadline came, you could stop, or was your brain still going?
I think it's true. There's no great way to be pregnant unless you are a superwoman. I found that I was definitely in the camp of, because I wanted to try and be as chilled as I could, I basically did nothing other than work and then hermit in the rest of the time. I think also it was January and February, so I wasn't really doing anything like that anyway. And actually that worked for me. I really liked having sort of some focus. I had some sort of worrying things that were happening towards the end of my pregnancy. All fine now, but that actually just work and being able to focus on that gave me something to take my mind off of other things. I'm not advocating work, give yourself burnout prior to having a child. I would also say get as much sleep as you can before the baby comes, because I think going into having a baby well rested meant that basically the first month I was sort of okay because I had this residual level of sleep that could sort of see me through.
Absolutely.
Be kind to yourself. And also people are like, I think I'm a huge people pleaser by nature. So I'm always like, I'll do it. Actually, people are really happy and willing to be like, no, you are 9 months pregnant. I will do it. And you have to just not look a gift horse in the mouth. Just take that help.
The people pleasing will start punishing you because, and punishing people around you, because you can keep, I'm saying this to myself.
Yeah.
I can keep saying, I'll do it. And then the day will come where I won't be able to do it.
Yes.
And actually, if I haven't given someone a really meaningful chance to have a go and to go, I got this far and then I got stuck.
Yes.
Then I'm not teaching.
And you're not being helpful to them in the long run.
Absorbing it all.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
Preach.
the millennial manager. Don't worry, I'll just do it all. Don't you worry about it.
Yeah, which we've been taught, because we've been told that budgets are tight and that we've got to muck in, and that success is like graft in many ways. It's like either you're working really hard or you're resting really hard, and those are like our metrics for being good at our jobs.
Totally.
When actually that's not really teaching our teams anything.
No, it's not helpful at all in the long run.
Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you for
We'll put the
having
words
me.
right. Thank you so much for listening. Please, can you do me one favour now and subscribe? It makes such a difference. We're moving through this series of conversations with CMOs and marketing directors, recording them in advance while I go off and have my own baby and my own maternity journey. And we'll be back with a series of interviews with new mums and parents about their journeys balancing work and their new lives.